at 7 p.m. The first case is case number 20-38, 91 Walnut Street, special permit request under section 5B2 of the zoning bylaws to allow construction of an accessory in-law suite, approximately 880 square feet. I believe we, Ashley, can you admit the applicant at this time? And we all received the application and supporting documents too.
I'm just trying to find the applicant, but I did promote his contractor. Okay, found him.
Good evening, guys.
Oh, not you. Wrong John. Okay, the applicant's promoted.
Okay, good evening. John, this is the Zoning Board of Appeals, obviously, and what we have before us is your application for a in-law suite. We all have the plans in front of us, and with the plot plans. So if you would, do you want to walk us through what you're proposing to do and a little background about how you got to this point? Obviously, you needed to come to the zoning board for the special permit, but if you can explain what you're trying to do, that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you very much for hearing me. I have my wife and I have one parent left, her mom. She will be 83 next year. I'm sorry, in March. And she's been a widow for probably 30 plus years. And what we're decided to do is we basically sold her house in Connecticut. And now we would like to just put an in-law and have her live with us on our current property. We initiated Kevin Uniac and Associates to have our drawings. And we got those, and then we went through the whole process to find contractors. We settled on Dan McQuillan, and I think the plans meet all the variances and laws that the town has set forth, and we're ready to go.
Okay, so as I said, we do have the plans in front of us, and I think a lot of it looks good. I do have one question for you as far as is there a common access to both the main house and the in-law suite?
So what the proposal is, if you kind of look where the existing house is and where the addition is, there will be a hallway, maybe I think 4 feet wide, that goes the entire length. So there'll be a common entrance. You go into that hallway, and then you would go to the in-law to the right side, approximately halfway down that hallway, and go into the existing structure to the left side. And then there'll be a door at the end of that hallway to the backyard. And then there should be, I believe there's a porch on the back of the new addition, so it'll be kind of like a common, hopefully the flow will work. Does that answer your question, John?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Oh.
Didn't answer mine.
Go ahead, Suzanne. Do you have a question?
Well, I can't get any of that on my iPad, on my phone. Who owns the property at 91 Walnut?
My wife and I have lived here since 1997.
Okay. Just on the application form, it doesn't say. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. I apologize
Okay.
for that omission.
No, that's it. I think you can't do it nowadays because of pandemic or some song and dance.
Okay.
Okay, so John, it's just hard for me to read the plans on a small thing. So if John understood it, I'm good. I didn't get it.
Oh.
What is the front part? Is that a porch?
Basically, I believe the structure will be like 40 feet long. So the first section will be the bedroom. The middle section would be like the living common den area. And then in the back, there'll be storage, kitchen, bathroom.
John, has the fire department had a chance to look at your
I'd have to refer to what Viewpoint says. I think they said but I just don't have that on me, and I'm not intelligent enough to click off the fire department.
Nope, I've got it right here. Drew, I have it. It's dated December 8th from Paul Barry, Deputy Chief. It says, we offer no opposition to the request, and if the request is approved, they'll have to have existing life safety devices updated. So the fire department's good with it. My only question, and I think the applicant has answered this, is, I always say, how is this not an apartment, a separate apartment on the house? And I think it's because they have the common hallway, or the corridor between them. So you enter into the house, and then there's French doors into the main part of the house, and then to the right, it's into the living area.
Where are you seeing all this? Where are you seeing the French doors and everything?
It's on the lower level plan.
Okay. Oh, all right. Oh boy, that's even harder on my iPhone. Holy
if
crap.
you're on an iPhone, I don't know how you're doing it. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Dan McQuillan's been welcome. He could probably pipe in some of the designs too.
Okay.
I'm good.
Yeah. No, Suzanne, I think our concern has always been creating apartments, and this does have the corridor coming in with the French doors. Okay. So, I mean, I think that it's meeting and it has the common entrance from the front. Only one common entrance from the front. So, I thought it was good. Dave Anderson, any questions or comments on this?
Nope.
Okay, Bob.
Nope. It's a great plan, and it looks like it continues to look like a single family home is one of the requirements. So I think the plans look good to me.
Thanks, Bob.
You bet, John.
And Drew, anything?
No, I think the plans look good.
Okay, and I just have one thing. I did take a look when I drove by. How close are you coming to the property line? Do you know either Dan or John?
We are basically on the line.
There's a plot plan that was included in the application, I believe, that shows the setbacks, and I believe they're all within they're outside the required setbacks. In other words, they comply with the setbacks.
Yeah, he's all within right on the addition.
John, you're muted.
The reason I'm asking that is because in the plot plan, it shows a 17.4 inch setback is being met, yet when you actually look at the plan, and this is why I'm glad you have your builder here, I see a line that's running at the same angle from the front to the back, and it's actually touching in the back. So what are the setbacks? Do you know what the setbacks are?
They should be labeled at the bottom of the plot plan that's in front of you guys, what the setbacks are for the neighborhood, what it's zoned as.
Yep. It's 15 feet, and you're at 17 feet, 17.4. So what you're showing on the plot plan is good. I just want to make sure it's built like that. So when the foundation goes in, that's what's going in.
Yeah, we have to provide an as-built to Mr. Yankovic at the town, obviously. So when we pour the footing, we have that pinned, and then when we do the foundation, typically before we even backfill, we submit an as-built from the engineer before we even backfill, stating that we built it the way that the plans show. It's pretty standard practice. And I've worked with Mike in the past on another similar situation over on Village several years ago when Mike was here, and then he went back to Brookline, and then he came back to Walpole. So Mike and I have kind of been through the in-law requirements before.
Okay, that sounds good, as long as it's making the setbacks as shown, which is it's shown like that. Okay, so John, do you want to, unless board members, any questions or comments? I'm gonna open it up to the public. Amy, is there anybody here from the public or neighbors to speak on this?
I'm not seeing anyone have their hand raised.
If you want to speak on this, please raise your hand on the screen. Okay. If there's nobody, John, at this point, do you want to close the hearing? And you probably would close the hearing at this point if you're happy.
I am ecstatic. I am looking forward to this project, and I can't wait for the excavators to come and dig holes.
Okay, sounds good. So,
Thank you, Dan.
so first thing we're going to do is we're going to close the hearing. So could I have a motion to close case number 20-38 for 91 Walnut Street?
So moved.
Moved by Suzanne.
Second by Jane.
Second by Jane. Any further discussion? And this is just closing the hearing. Okay, no further discussion. Roll call vote to close the hearing. And voting on this will be the regular members. Suzanne Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay, so we voted to close the hearing. Now, could I have a motion to approve case number 20-38, 91 Walnut Street, with the one condition that was mentioned in the write-up from, I believe it was Board of Health, which was drains have to be put into the ground for surface water.
If Jim, you want to chime in and bring the board up to speed, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so Mr. Burke has withdrawn his variance as he altered the garage and made it compliant. So his garage is at the minimum requirement, which is 15 feet of a setback from his neighbour. So he's altered that garage as of last week. I was out there looking at the frame for him. So he's actually moved that garage back, so there's no reason for his variance anymore, so he's going to be withdrawing it.
Great.
Okay, and I did a drive-by and I saw that it looked like it had been taken back, and Mr. Crowley, it meets the, you're satisfied that it meets the setback from the property line?
Yeah, he needed basic 1 foot 6 inches of a setback. He's moved it back over 2 feet just to be safe.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So at this point, I see Mr. Burke's on the line. Mr. Burke, do you want to withdraw your application without prejudice? That's how we do it. Mr. Burke, we didn't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, I would like to request to withdraw the variance, please.
Okay, very good. So, could I have a motion to withdraw case number 30-37 without prejudice? This is for the variance.
So moved.
Okay.
Second by Jane.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Bob, are you comfortable with this? Can't hear you.
Yeah, no, it all sounds good. There's no need for zoning relief or the variance anymore now that the structure's been modified. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to withdraw.
Okay. So this is to approve the, we're going to vote to allow the applicant to withdraw the application. Okay. Could I, we've already had the motion seconded for discussion. Any further discussion? Okay. This is a roll call vote. All those, let's see. So in favor, say aye. Suzanne Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay. Very good. So that one's withdrawn. Now, next we have for this evening, this is case number 30-36 for 52 School Street, an administrative appeal of the zoning enforcement officer's notice, violation notice and cease and desist under section 3.2 of the zoning bylaws. And that's for failure to secure a certificate of occupancy for a new use of metal and steel manufacturing. Section 5B of the zoning bylaws, scheduled use of regulation, heavy manufacturing of steel is not allowed in the LM, the limited manufacturing district, resulting in a noise violation for the production of loud and offensive noise to the abutters of the business, which is KW Steel. Okay. This evening we have with us a number of people that are going to work us through this. We have Town Council George Pucci with us. We also have Mike Yanovich from he is the zoning enforcement officer who issued the cease and desist. We also have Mark Horner from representing KW Steel, and Nancy Webster from KW Steel, and I also see we have Chief Carmichael with us, and Jim Johnson. So a lot of people to address this issue tonight. At this point, I think I'd like to turn it over to Mike Yanovich. If you want to comment on where we are as far as your you issued the cease and desist, and bring us up to date on that, and then I'm going to turn it over to the applicant after you, Mike.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you again, Mike Yanovich, Building Commissioner. So just bring you up to speed. I think previous meeting made most of my comments heard, but since then we had an accident, I believe it was on January 4th, that was not directly related to KW Steel, but was a subcontractor, KW Steel. We issued an amended cease and desist, ordering KW Steel to cease all large deliveries, so any oversized deliveries. And the way that this works for the people that are at home or the people that are listening is we issued the cease and desist. However, the way that the way that things work is the courts look for the town to exhaust all its administrative remedies. So the administrative remedy right now is we're at the Board of Appeals, and the Board of Appeals needs to render a decision on the cease and desist, whether or not the use is allowed, whether or not the use is unsafe, whatever the decision may be. So we amended our cease and desist. We've been dealing with the neighbors at this point on a daily basis, from the time that the original complaint came in through this most recent accident on January 4th. So here we are. Again, just to reiterate, we've amended the cease and desist to order that they not receive any deliveries. And what we've agreed upon is any oversized deliveries will have a police detail, and they will call the town and notify the town when those deliveries are taking place. So Our contentions are still the same. We're not exactly clear what use is allowed there as far as light manufacturing, heavy manufacturing, and where that line is defined. But we are here, and we're looking to the board to define or render a decision as to what KW Steel is subject to. So that's where we are at this point.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to add, just for the record, that today there was a site visit by the zoning board. 3 members of the zoning board were able to attend, Bob Fitzgerald, Dave Anderson, and myself. And we went there, and really we didn't have any deliberations. We just took in evidence to see what is the actual operation that's going on at KW Steel. Because as the zoning enforcement officer just pointed out, the issue that we're really dealing with is this a allowed use in the limited manufacturing zone? And that's the question before the zoning board. And I see town council shaking his head in affirmative. George, that's really what we're looking at tonight. Is that correct?
Correct. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. George Pucci from Town Council's office. That's correct. If this use is if it qualifies as light manufacturing, which is permitted as of right in that zone, I just wanted to mention, and I was nodding my head, not shaking it, in response to your statement. Just to follow up on Mike's comment, though, about the serious accident that occurred in the interim period. The procedure, there was a timely appeal of the cease and desist order, the original one from the building commissioner. That is before you. The operator of the business has the right to pursue an administrative appeal of the cease and desist, and typically before anybody seeks any type of injunctive relief. The accident occurred while this appeal is pending. So the building commissioner was then presented with that compelling public safety issue in the meantime. So what he did was he issued an amended cease and desist, and then to sort of maintain the status quo while this administrative appeal is pending, the agreement was reached to use police details in the event of any large loads to or from that property. So hopefully, regardless of the impact of the business on the residences, at least, hopefully that public safety issue has been, resolved so that you can proceed with this administrative appeal. So, that agreement reached between the building commissioner and the operator of the business is by no means to minimize the residents' complaints about adverse effects, but it is meant in a way to allow this administrative appeal to proceed and stop any public safety issue in the meantime through those police details.
Okay, thank you, George. And even though everybody's aware of the accident that took place there, that's not really what the issue before the zoning board is. The issue before the zoning board is it a allowed use in the limited manufacturing zoning district. So it's always good if we focus to what is the question that the zoning board is trying to answer. So that being said, I'd like to turn it over to the applicant or the applicant's counsel to present where they are on this and what their take is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mark Corner. I'm from the firm of Reamer and Braunstein. I represent KW Steel, and I appreciate Mr. Lee, Mr. Anderson, and Mr. Fitzgerald coming out to the site today. Hopefully, you've had the opportunity to see the inside of KW Steel, to see its operations, and to see what type of equipment it uses and how it runs its operations. I did late today submit a supplemental letter to the board, which contains contains some photographs of some of the equipment that's used in operations, and it also contains some noise meter readings that my client took yesterday with a noise chart, basically correlating the noise readings that my client took in various locations around the property, and correlating them to analogous types of noises in terms of decibel level. So if you don't have that document before you, I can either put it up on the screen, or I can I'd certainly ask that it be made part of the record. Excuse me. As far as this accident goes, I think I'm hearing correctly that this is, this is, as Mr. Lee pointed out, this isn't that the issue before the board is whether this my client's operation is an allowed use in the limited manufacturing district. It's not the light manufacturing district as defined in the bylaw. And I previously submitted documentation on that point. What we're dealing with, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, is I think you have I think you're dealing with a bylaw that doesn't necessarily do what you would intend it to do. This is, as I pointed out in my previous letter, there isn't a distinction made in the bylaw between uses that are allowed in the light manufacturing district and the industrial district. And I believe last time we were before you, I had the chart up on the screen, and in each of the locations in the columns of the allowed uses, almost entirely, with a few exceptions not relevant here, if it's allowed in the industrial districts, it's allowed in the limited manufacturing district, and that seems to be I think that's the problem the board is faced with. I think ideally this would be a situation, given this location, that probably what would have been appropriate here is to have this use in this location be a special permit use, so that it comes before the board, it's approved, it's either allowed, and if it's allowed, it's approved with conditions. Unfortunately, that's not where you are, and the board is really left with the determination of whether this is allowed or not. And I think it leaves the board. I think it leaves the board with two bad choices. The board can uphold the cease and desist order. I can tell you that will be challenged. It'll result in litigation that will probably run through the end of the lease term, and there's no guarantee that while the litigation's pending, that my client will not be operating as it's been doing. The second alternative would be to affirm the cease and it would be to overturn the cease and desist order. The client will be able to continue to operate again without any conditions imposed by the board. Of course, that they're subject to the other provisions of the bylaw and so forth. And obviously there are a number of neighbors that have registered their objections to this, and they're not happy, and that also might lead to litigation. My client, for its part, is not desiring to engage in litigation with the town. They want to simply continue their operations in their location as they've done for the past 19 months, and they're committed to working with the board and the building commissioner to mitigate the operations of their business in a way that's satisfactory to the town. They've already changed their hours of operation. They've started work an hour later in the day. They have certainly maintained their leaving the door to they're a large bay door in the back of the building. They keep that closed at all times that they're performing operations within the building to mitigate noise. And as Mr. Yanovich and Mr. Pucci pointed out, my clients have agreed to notify the town and to obtain a police detail anytime that they're operating an oversized load, and I use that term describe loads that where the DOT requires an escort, a private escort. And in addition to the escort, they would call for a police detail, and they've agreed to do that during the pendency of this case, and would continue to do that as a condition to continuing forward. As to the accident, I think it's important to note that, and Mr. Yanovich indicated that it's related to the operations, and I think it's important to note that the trailer that was involved in the operation was not my client's trailer. It was operated by a private contractor. And it's also, I think it's important to note that loads of that size are a relatively rare occurrence in my client's operations. But again, they would agree as a condition to moving forward to continue to maintain the police escorts. And in order to satisfy the town, my client would certainly be willing to entertain any other reasonable requests that the town might have that would address the concerns of the board and the building commissioner. Because again, I think this is the bylaw itself doesn't provide the opportunity for the board to impose conditions as it would if there were, for example, site plan review or a special permit. My client would agree to conditions as a condition to moving forward. As previously noted in my papers, the limited manufacturing district in your bylaw states that the purpose of the district is to provide an area for low density wholesale and unobtrusive manufacturing uses. And Mr. Lee and Mr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Anderson went to the site today, and they saw the types of operations that are there. And my client's business primarily involves cutting and joining of pieces of steel, so it involves welding, it involves bolting pieces together, it involves cutting of steel. So the types of tools and machinery that are involved they have 2 forklifts, they have a number of cutting torches, they have drills, they have high-powered wrenches that close things. It's really an issue more of assembly and fabrication of materials rather than the actual manufacturing of steel. It's not a foundry, for example. And these are uses that as I noted in my previous papers are akin to the uses that are allowed in the limited manufacturing district, which includes heavy machinery such as agricultural, construction, mining, railroad machinery, metal foundry products, or stone products such as abrasives and monuments. That's subsection P, and then subsection Q is planned for light metal or plastic fabrication or finishing, but not including heavy punch presses or drop hammers. And I think the members of the board who attended the site visit today can confirm, and my client will certainly confirm, that they don't have any heavy punch presses or drop hammers. Again, these are all activities that are conducted indoors. The original noise complaint that generated this dispute was a single isolated incident where a wrench was used outside in exigent circumstances for a short period of time, and that's the one and only time that's happened. And any time that tool is used is inside the building with the doors closed. There's also one of the assertions here is that my client did not obtain a certificate of occupancy, and I made a public records request to the building department for any certificates of occupancy, and I was provided a number of documents dating back to the 70s, and I didn't see it. I saw a single certificate of occupancy that was included among the documentation, which included a lot of applications for building permits and sign permits and so forth. The only certificate of occupancy that I saw was one for a devising wall that was issued in 2002. But certainly in the past, in the past 18 years, I've not, certainly from what I saw, there had not previously been a certificate of occupancy issued for this property. Again, we're happy to apply for one and continue the operations, subject to whatever to any conditions that we agree upon. But I would suggest that there's been no substantial change of use between my client's operation and the prior operation, which was Denmark Pumps. And I believe that was, I think, along the similar lines, had similar types of tools involved in I would describe it more like a machine shop than a heavy manufacturing facility. My clients, Nancy Weber and Harry Webster, are here, and if either of them has anything to add to what I've said, I'd invite them to do so.
Sometimes it's supposed to let the council do the talking.
Hearing nothing, if the board has any questions for me, or if anyone else has any questions for me, I will be happy to answer them. And but that's, I've submitted a substantial amount of materials, which I hope you have the opportunity to review, and hopefully they're helpful.
Okay, one thing on the material, yes, a lot of materials have been reviewed, and we've taken a look at that. But we have not seen the submittal that you had today, which I think you said had some noise readings that your client had done. We're not going to address that tonight, just because you sent it this afternoon, and that's going to take time to review. I see that we also have Chief Carmichael with us this evening, and Chief, do you want to comment on any of this, or do you have anything to add from your perspective?
Sure, thank you. I can comment a little bit on the public safety aspect. One of the questions, a couple of questions that we will have going forward would be likely how many loads we would be expecting coming out of that location if the operation continues, and how we're defining an oversized load. In this particular case, obviously, that those 100-foot I-beams that were extending 31 feet off the back of the truck, and that classifies as a wide load, and therefore that's why the two pilot vehicles were there to help transport and help escort that vehicle. So probably just to clarify that first of all before I get into the other stuff.
Well, Chief, thank you. Again, my client can certainly provide that information, but and would certainly agree to give advance notice to the town. I know and I'm checking my phone to see if Mr. Webster has any comment on that, because I think he had some internet problems. I'm informed that it's a relatively infrequent occurrence. With the materials hanging off the back, that was a mistake, and it was a mistake that was by the contractor. But we certainly would agree to whatever conditions that the town would require in the way of notice, and certainly would agree to a police detail, and would certainly be open to any other conditions that the town would impose, and we would certainly be amenable to providing whatever advance notice is required of the town.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I just want to touch real quick just upon it. I know this doesn't all fall on the business owner, but some of the crash reconstruction is completed. And actually, before I get it mentioned, I just want to, our thoughts are still with the operator of the Lexus, because unfortunately that gentleman is still in the hospital and, still being tended to there. So we just want to remind ourselves that we're thinking about him. One of the main issues with the operation of the truck was that when it pulled out, the intent was to pull out and go onto Hanson Ave and then back in. Unfortunately, when it did that, it was missing the safety requirements of flags, of warning lamps. The rear of the load was unsecure. things that contributed to the crash. We do know that based on the, we did a search warrant on the event data recorded from the vehicle, and based on the speed and the drop in speed 3 seconds before impact, we believe that it's likely that because of the color of the beams and the background, the gray background on that particular day, and I was up there and I can see how it could happen, but because these warning devices weren't on there, it blended in, and we don't think that the operator saw that those beams until like second before impact. We actually know it was probably 3.5 seconds before impact. So I think that the details would be would certainly satisfy our public safety needs and making sure that that truck or those trucks are pulling out safely into that street, but also the officers ensuring that all of the safety mechanisms are in place so that we can avoid something like this happening in the future. And if there's any questions, I can certainly answer them.
And Chief, that's absolutely acceptable and to my client, and my client also feels very badly about this accident. I will also, as I understand it, I'm not the best person to talk about it, not being an expert, but I understand that typically this is a truck that needed to be extended, and typically when this entire operation takes place on my client's property and doesn't extend out into the street, this was an unusual and incorrectly done situation, and so not likely to reoccur anyway. But that said, I think it's my client thinks it's appropriate, and I think it's appropriate that that there be additional scrutiny, that there be additional supervision from the Walpole Police be a condition to any sort of those loads. And again, my client's utterly willing and prepared to provide whatever information and whatever advance notice is helpful to the town.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so one of the things, we did go out there, take a look at it today, and I guess really the question the zoning board is looking at is this an allowed use, or is it an allowed use that would require a special permit from the zoning board? That's one of the other options. So at this point, do any board members want to comment on their thoughts on it? And we did not deliberate while we were at the site because we wanted to make sure that any deliberations were in the public meeting. So this is a chance for board members now to even talk about that. So Bob or Dave, you were there. Your thoughts on this?
I'm happy to start. I appreciate the opportunity to walk the site today and the building. Based on what I saw today, which was largely metal cutting with torches, some grinding tools being used, and then the explanation of sort of what typical operations would be. It didn't strike me as sort of a heavy industry, and that the definition of manufacturing includes assembly of materials, and it struck me that the basic business model here is to bring in raw materials, assemble them in some way, and it's all metal material, but assemble them and then ship them out to their destination. I didn't see any drop hammers or heavy presses. So in terms of what I saw today, I didn't observe anything that gave me a lot of concern in terms of the internal operations. The thing I'm trying to reconcile, I guess, a little bit is the couple of incidents. One, the use of the impact wrench outdoors, which I think is what precipitated the original noise complaint. With that being sort of has been represented sort of a one-time thing, which was also due to an error of some kind, in that some of the bolts were not tightened appropriately, and so the hammer had to be brought outdoors to correct. Reconciling that with a lot of the information that we've been receiving from the neighbors that have videos of sounds of what sounds like, pounding of some kind on something, on more than one date. So it's clear that there's some level of noise that's annoying to the neighbors that may go beyond that one incident. But certainly today, the operations that I observed, and when we were discussing it with KW Steel, that was sort of representative in their view of a typical workforce of maybe 5 or 7 individuals working on the site. So I think one thing, and just hearing the discussion so far, I think one thing I'm thinking about in my mind is whether one option for the board to consider would be to require the issuance of a certificate of occupancy if we do conclude that the use is allowed, and then include in that certificate, or perhaps in a side agreement, conditions that the applicant's counsel has suggested, and perhaps others, in terms of addressing Chief Carmichael's concerns about safety, the police detail, the timing of deliveries, the operation of equipment exclusively indoors, things that would, do our best to kind of get our arms around the activities that are causing concerns, either from a noise perspective or from a public safety perspective, and include those in some sort of agreement, so that, both the noise complaints, but also the, pretty substantial public safety concerns are addressed, recognizing that it may not or won't happen in the future, but the risk seems to me very high when you have someone who's been in an accident and remains in the hospital due to, I'm not saying it's the KW Steel's issue, it might be their contractor, but ultimately they're going to be making those decisions as to who they contract with and how those contractors comport themselves. And so we can't, I think one more accident is too many, given the severity. It's already happened once, and there needs to be some sort of constraints placed on that specific operation if the board concludes that it should go forward, to prevent it from happening again. So those are my thoughts thus far.
John?
Go ahead, Jane.
Yes, I didn't go today, but I had driven there previously. Back and around there, and it's tight sneakers to be sure. Where the door is to get in and out. That being said, we do have to grapple with whether what's going on there does fit light manufacturing, and it sounds as though it probably does. The issue of noise, I think the applicant has tried to resolve that and done the best, and from what the attorney has said, they'd be willing to do anything they could to correct that problem. My main concern actually involves this accident, because as soon as I saw this on the news at noontime, the day that it happened, the first thing I thought was, these streets are much too narrow to have anything of that size going up and down, trying to back up or turn around or even turn a corner. I just couldn't believe it when I saw it. I just think that we ought to look into that aspect of it as well. It may be that at limited manufacturing it meets the criteria, and it sounds like it does. But to me, I think almost the more overriding issue from a safety standpoint is having this, even if it's only on occasion. I don't even think on occasion should be happening here. That's a very dangerous thing. The streets are narrow. And I'm also thinking, even if we were to resolve the issue by saying, yes, they would have a police detail, I think that's all and well and good, but if we come to that, I think we ought to limit the hours that when the police department would feel as less traffic. For instance, I wouldn't like to see that with the detail when schools are getting out or going into school, or there was something going on that was more traffic than average. So that's my thought on it. Overall, I'm more concerned about the size of the vehicles. Limited manufacturing inside is one thing, but this heavy equipment, I don't think belongs in a limited manufacturing. And I wonder, in past years, now I've lived here for 52 years, and I never heard of any issue up there in all that time. But I'm wondering, have they ever had vehicles that big trying to get in and out? Never mind coming down the street, just backing in and out of the back of that building. To me, I can't imagine how that's doable. That's
Okay, thank you, Jane.
If I could.
Yeah, Dave Anderson, go ahead.
I would agree, obviously I did the site visit today. I would agree with Bob's assessment of our site visit. The overall visit, we were there for a little while. We took a really good look around. I did see some equipment, but not anything I would consider. I think the heaviest equipment that we saw there would be the forklifts. Other than that, some torches, grinders, drills, things like that. I did ask specifically and look for the drop hammer, because we had seen some, heard some pretty loud noises and heard some significant sounds coming out of it that sounded as such. And it was explained to me that was a sledgehammer. I didn't see any hammer drills there, but a sledgehammer, and working with steel and some of the things that they do, when you hit a piece of steel with a sledgehammer in a big warehouse with the door open in the back, I know that the door open in the back came up. I imagine that would sound like something coming out of a cannon if you were behind that. As far as outside, I didn't see any equipment outside that would lead me to believe that they were doing any sort of outside work with equipment on any of their steel or anything like that. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Drew, we're just going to go through the board members first. So, Drew, do you have anything else to add or comment on?
Yeah, I do. I have kind of a lengthy list here, and I want to preface it by saying that I'm sincerely in favor of businesses in the town of Walpole, and especially that being a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business. I exceptionally would like to extend my gratitude for their ability to conduct themselves in the town of Walpole. That being said, I've got a couple issues here that, as I listen to Mr. Corner express or talk about his client, you said to the tone of that we took a decibel reading yesterday. That's 126 days after the initial complaint came in. The initial complaint came in on September 16th of a decibel reading that annoyed the neighbors. To me, that's not a caring business owner within the district that they're working. The trucking situation is concerning on a magnitude of different levels. I actually abstained from going to the meeting today because I felt that when you know someone's watching, you're on your best behavior. So I've been on project sites where OSHA shows up and everyone's doing the right thing. Just so happens that day is the best day of the year. And I've been on sites where DEP or anyone else shows up and everything's in compliance and we meet all the perfect regulations. But I did happen to go there last week and I observed the property from a public roadway, and I noticed two forklifts that needed to lift a 50-foot beam onto a 40-foot tractor trailer. They needed to pull the tractor trailer out of the way so that the 2 forklifts could pick up a 12 by 12 steel beam. The tractor trailer would then back up and they would load it onto that. And then they did this about 3 or 4 times before the tractor trailer pulled up to the front of the property, at which they secured the load, and there was Walpole police that were present, I'm assuming to escort the vehicle out of the town. But I'm concerned that the suggestion of, well, we'll call and notify the town of oversized deliveries is now we're going to rely on the compliance of the business owner. From what I observed that day, that's heavy steel. You know, if you were talking about an HVAC unit that's going in someone's house, I'd say that's a light manufacturing product that involves metal. But when you're talking about 12 by 12 or larger steel beams that are extending beyond a tractor trailer on a local residential roadway, that's heavy manufacturing, in my opinion. And to see that, well, it was the tractor trailer driver's responsibility. You know, that's in some parts true. But I guess they also look at that and say, well, what is the business owner doing to vet those tractor trailer drivers that they're hiring? And are they paying attention to what they're loading onto what the transport vehicle is going to be? You know, I don't know if pilot vehicles are required to notify local law enforcement or traffic enforcers, but a pilot vehicle to me doesn't you know, resolve that issue. And lastly, you know, I just wanted to kind of follow up with the fact that the operations involved here are you know, at times I'm sure compliant with lesser involved manufacturing, but from what I've witnessed with my own eyes and what I've heard the applicant's representatives speak about, I have a hard time believing that this business will fit into this zoning district.
Okay, thank you, Drew. Okay, unless any other board members want to comment, what I'd like to do is open it up to the public, and with that, you know, keep the comments focused. I actually see the applicant's attorney waving. So, do you have something to say, Mr. Klein?
I just wanted to follow up on a couple of points made by the board members, if I could. And one of the things that both Mr. Delaney and Mr. Fitzgerald noted, they were asking about vetting of the truck drivers. Understand that those truck drivers are not they're not my clients' subcontractors. They are they're the customer's truck subcontractor. So this is the steel beams that went out did not belong to my client. They belonged to the customer to whom they were being delivered. So it was the customer's truck, not my client's contractor. A distinction about a difference under the circumstances here, because we are agreeing to take responsibility for taking the additional step. To Mr. Delaney's point, no. To my knowledge, a pilot truck is not required under DOT regulations to notify local police. That's why my client is agreeing to do that. Understand that these trucks are subject to they're subject to the jurisdiction of the Mass Department of Transportation. So the operation of the truck on the streets falls within that jurisdiction. Which includes the requirements for having pilot vehicles for a load of a particular length. As far as the timing of Ms. Coffey made note of timing of trucks entering and leaving the property, and that's a perfectly appropriate condition that my clients would agree to. And I believe there's a DOT requirement that such loads not leave before 9 a.m. So that is, but whatever is appropriate for the town that would satisfy the town, my client would certainly live with those conditions.
Okay, thank you. Chief Carmichael, a question for you, because we just heard the applicant's attorney, Mr. Connor, talk about escort vehicles. Are there requirements that escort vehicles notify the local police when they arrive at a site, separate from an agreement that you've maybe come to, but is that already an existing requirement?
No, there's not. Massachusetts general law actually requires any oversized load to have two pilot vehicles, one in the front, one in the rear. Strangely enough, it only applies to numbered state highways, which seems pretty odd, because that would mean that the truck actually traveling, on a side street or something like that, it wouldn't actually be required, at least under the law. So that's actually one of the things that was identified in the crash reconstruction. But once that vehicle reaches a state numbered highway, they are required to have the front and back pilot vehicles.
So just so I'm clear on this, if the truck's on 27 or on 1A, it's required, but as soon as it turns from 27 onto School Street, it would not be required?
According to the law, yeah.
Okay.
Obviously the other issues apply in this case with flags, with warning lights, with the load being secure, obvious things like that. But as far as the pilot vehicles, it really applies to numbered highways, at least under that. And there would be no requirement for them to notify, the police department.
Excuse me, Chief Carmichael, is there a special training involved with being involved in DOT inspections for vehicles traveling through the road? Is that a standard thing that all officers have, or is that something patrolmen I know the state police have that. Certainly they have their truck enforcement.
So in this particular case, we kind of did that collaboratively. The state police did the portion of the truck team stuff. We called the truck team out. They weighed the vehicle. I think one of those beams actually weighs 8,000 pounds, if I remember correctly. And so they did the citations as far as the flags, the warning lamps, typical stuff that the truck team would do. And then the reconstruction portion of the investigation was conducted by the Walpole Police Department by one of our officers who is, as a trained reconstructionist, he's ACTA certified. And he did the investigation portion in citing the truck operator for motor vehicle violations such as negligent operation. So it was a joint thing.
So if we were able to approve on a special permit this applicant operating there, is there someone from the Walpole Police Department that could perform DOT inspections with vehicles leaving the property, or will we be relying upon that vehicle entering a numbered highway or passageway that would fall under the state police that would have that specialty, I guess? Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's typical, your average safety violations, obviously could be monitored and enforced by any police officer. But when you get into other stuff like the vehicle weights, shifting of the load and that type of thing, then that would have to be something that would be a specialist from the truck team.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Welcome.
At this point, I'd like to open it up to comments from the public and hear any new information or anything that they want to make as points this evening.
All right, I'm just going to go in order then. Bill O'Connell, I'm going to promote to speak. There you go. You can speak, Bill, if you'd like.
Mr. O'Connell, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Again, I represent Dave and Stephanie Lynch at 12 Harshorn, and I'm going to renew my request to for the board to uphold the building inspector's original cease and desist order, which was dated on October 13th, as well as the amended cease and desist order, which my understanding was issued on January 4th, and order that the building enforcement, that this board order the building inspector to enforce them as a zoning enforcement officer and take the actions under the bylaw, including seeking an enjoyment of the use, any injunctions. From what I've heard, and with all due respect to town council, it seems like the only issue that is that the issue that's being framed is that it's a use issue. We would obviously argue that it's a heavy manufacturing use that's not allowed in an LM zone, which the clear definition references that the use is supposed to be unobtrusive. I think you heard from board member Delaney what's really happening at the site, but the conversation I've heard today, with all due respect, has shifted the burden to the residents. And our concern is that, and there was reference to a police detail and potentially a special permit, which I would submit. The use isn't allowed as right, so I'm not sure where a special permit is coming in, but I would submit that this is an easy decision for the board. There's been a cease and desist order. There was an amended cease and desist order. My client, Dave Lynch, is going to speak to some of the subsequent activities that he's witnessed, and there's been video that have been submitted referencing violations of both the cease and desist as well as the amended cease and desist order. And again, from what I've heard, our concern is that the residents are not being put first, and that they are the ones that have the burden through the way this matter is being framed. I would submit that irrespective of whether the use is allowed or not, I would ask the board to look at Section 5A, basic requirements 5AB, which I would submit independently requires that the use not produce any emission of any vibration, noise, glare, other nuisances, dust, smoke in the immediate neighborhood. And as this board knows, the reason we have zoning bylaws is to protect the neighbors, especially in this type of situation. So, with all due respect to the applicant's counsel, that this was not, that the incident that happened on 1-4 did not include, one of their contractors. I would say that issue can't be delegated. I would imagine that the contractor was either uploading or was loading their steel or had dropped it off. And there's, as you'll hear, there's deliveries going there all the time. Board member Delaney had referenced heavy steel manufacturing. So I think that the zoning bylaw in the sections at issue, especially 5A, B, the specific use provisions, this use is not allowed. The other issue is the activities that are outdoors, that are abutting and bordering Mr. Lynch's and the other neighbors' properties. I'm not sure that was looked at. The outside storage, the outside activities, which is presenting, major issues, not only noise but danger issues with the offloading of steel. So for those reasons, and again, I'd like to, if the board could give my client an opportunity to speak to the issues of specifically what's been going on there since the last board meeting, we greatly appreciate it. So we appreciate the board's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Amy, who's next?
Okay, next we have Kevin Dieter. Here we go. Kevin, you're on.
Hi, are you able to hear me? All right, I'm seeing some nodding. Thank you very much for taking the time. My name is Kevin Dieter. I'm the property owner of 35 Hanson Avenue, which is directly across the street from 52 School Street. I just really, I was very glad to hear several members of the board raise the public safety issue surrounding the large trucks that are coming up and down the streets and kind of doing these backing up maneuvers, pulling into Hanson Avenue and then backing into the property. I don't want to, repeat things that have already been said. The only thing that I would add is that I was very surprised to hear the characterization that the expectation going forward was that these deliveries would be rare with large trucks. My experience just from looking out my own window, I've been working from home during the pandemic, is that there are large trucks pulling in and out of there at least 2 to 3 times a week. And I would just be very surprised. Maybe they're planning to change going forward. I don't know. But, certainly that, in my view, has not matched up with what I've seen prior to this point. So, I am just, I agree with the things that have been said, that the trucks kind of pulling in and out seem to be too large, but from my perspective, it's narrow streets and very large trucks. So, just wanted to kind of raise that point. So thank you to all of you for hearing these issues.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Okay, next we have Jack
Amy.
Fisher. Yep. All right, I'm going to promote Jack Fisher. He's next.
Can you hear me now? All right, I can't hear anybody. John, you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Fisher.
Okay.
Thank you.
This came through. All right, Jack Fisher, as I was at the last hearing, as I said, for almost 35 years, I lived as an abutter to the factory. And I can tell you very clearly that there has been a continued, this is a very, very large departure from the previous use. Prior to this, it was Denmark Pump. Prior to that, it was Walpole Woodworkers. Prior to that, it was Ingersoll Rand. And prior to that, it was Hill Machine. And it was clear that it was limited manufacturing. This is heavy manufacturing by any stretch of the imagination. I want to talk I'm going to hit on several points. First of all, the statement that these deliveries are rare is just not true. Okay, the gentleman prior to me, who lives on Hanson Ave, has seen multiple deliveries from the week after the accident, and I actually was down talking to Mike at the building commissioner. That day, they had a police detail escorting a truck with an oversized load again. That was less than a week later. So these happen frequently, despite what the owner and the owner's attorney is claiming. A couple things about the zoning. I think what's key is low density, unobtrusive. When you're taking in big deliveries and you're making the kinds of shipments of oversized material that they're doing, that's certainly not unobtrusive and is not in keeping within the spirit of the zoning. Okay, it's certainly not low density if they're having those kinds of deliveries and that kind of stuff. The other thing I would like to point out very quickly is, and I'm going to read very directly from the zoning bylaw, paragraph Q. Okay, what's permitted under limited manner, where it's talking about plant for light metal or plastic fabrication or finishing, but not including the heavy punch press or drop hammers. Light metal or plastic fabrication. Okay, when you're talking about a 100-foot steel beam, that's weighs 8,000 pounds, by any common sense, any definition that you might apply, that's not light metal fabrication. That's not small parts. That's not the type of things that had been manufactured there, assembled there, produced there over the last 50 years. These are heavy things. And I had a conversation with Mike about this, and I understand his position, but if you look at the documentation from the company on their website, there's a thing called the NACS code, which is a classification type of work that they do, and they called out 6 or 7. All but 2 called out specific activities that were associated with building girders, bridge girders, heavy beams for commercial buildings. This is clearly, by any common sense, an instance of heavy metal fabrication, which is not permitted under Section Q of the zoning table. And so I respectfully disagree with anybody that says this is not something that is allowed. It's never been done before. None of the permits that have been issued in the past was this type of activity called out. Okay, and I think that's very, very important that to understand if you're producing an 8,000 pound beam that overhangs the back of a truck by 20 feet and is 100 feet long, by no definition does that can you consider that to be light or metal or plastic fabrication. It's just not true. One other thing I would ask that you take a quick look at, all right, and I did a little bit of research, and Mike has done some research, and if you go back to the original permitting that was done for this building when it was expanded, and you have to go back to 1970, 1969, all right, there's a couple of things that are key in there. One is, and I'm going to be reading from something. Okay, is there's no parking permitted on the right-hand side of that building. The permits that were originally issued they were issued with a condition that there be no parking on the right-hand side of the building. There no be loading dock there. That's why they built the big loading docks on the other side of the building. And the grass area was not to be used for a driveway or parking area. Okay, that's a buffer zone. And to get the big trucks in and out, you can just go up there and look, and you can see that there's tracks in the grass 25, 35 feet up the street. And that's just totally inappropriate based upon the original permitting, which no one has seemed to wanted to take a look at. So I would suggest to the Zoning Board of Appeals that if you look at the original permitting, the use of that right-hand side of the building going towards School Street, on the School Street side, there are multiple conditions set for the original owners. This was back in the John Hill days, okay, to allow that expansion. And so to be using that to fabricate, bring trucks in and load trucks from the right-hand side and park cars there is just completely inappropriate. So I would suggest very strongly that this is not a use that's permitted within that area. 2, it hasn't been permitted for a long time. 3, on the right-hand side, there's a lot of use going on that's not appropriate and is not supported by the original permits and the conditions that were on the original permits for expansion. And 4th, these are violations that are happening frequently. And everybody seems to be concerned, well, this is a business. Well, you're talking about a neighborhood here, ladies and gentlemen. The neighbors have lived there. I lived there for 35 years almost. And we never had a problem with the company, regardless of who it was, going back to Hill Machine. They were sensitive to the neighbors. They wanted to work with us. Okay? Mr. Webster and management there has never reached out to the neighbors. There's been no discussion. Just, we're going to do what we want. They make a big deal about the fact that they changed the hours. That doesn't help the safety issues. That doesn't help the use issues. So I respectfully request that you uphold the cease and desist and the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Okay, so next we have, forgive me if I don't pronounce it right, Gianfranco Commune? Is that correct? I hope it is. Anyway, they're promoted. You're now on.
Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you everyone for giving me the time to speak. I'm new to Walpole, like my neighbor Kevin. We've been in this house for a year and a half. We own the property on the corner of Hanson and School, so I guess you can say we are directly impacted, and I agree that we have seen many mid-sized to longer trucks going in and out. It definitely is obtrusive. Of course, being new here, I have nothing personal against the business. I'm not part of Walpole enough to know the history. But one thing I would like to mention, one point is, I've been on since the beginning, and I agree it needs to stay focused on the original mission, which was the noise complaint. However, it's very hard to silo the noise complaint from the trucking. The trucks are pretty big. They're very noisy. They have their pressurized brakes. Every time they hit a brake, you hear it. A lot of times they're parked while they're waiting to know where they need to maneuver the truck. They're parked outside on the street, be it on School Street, be it in front of our house on Hanson, and the trucks are running. A perfect example was last Thursday when we believe, because we don't have speculation, but we believe that the beams that were involved in the accident had been returned, and there was a police escort. The truck was trying to maneuver, and they were trying to remove those beams with forklifts, and for about an hour, it was banging, clicking, the truck moving back and forth, the truck running. The noise is not only the soldering or the hammering inside the building. We must consider noise also the trucks outside. We must consider noise the braking that these trucks are doing while maneuvering. It's not as simple as we'll close the warehouse doors and you don't hear anything. It goes beyond that. And from where our point of view, where we're all working from home, sometimes I'm outside on a call, these noises are pretty loud, even if it's 11 o'clock in the morning. Aside from the accident, which, I really feel for the driver, and, had he had an SUV, we would have been having a different discussion, and it could have happened to any of us. That's what scares me. Aside from the safety concerns, but if we do want to focus on noise, we can't just consider the noise inside the building. We need to consider the operations outside, the regular operations. Not that one time they needed the wrench because they had, misaligned the whatever it was the delivery had to deliver. But we have to consider the day-to-day operations too. These are big trucks. They're big diesel engines. We can hear them very well from our house. The immediate neighbors, us, Dave Lynch, Kevin, we are impacted even just by those daily trucks going big and, going in and out. Along with the fact that, of course, as I said before, I don't want to repeat it because it had been said, it is intrusive. Just to give you an example, the day of the accident, we were blocked in our house for the entire day because the nose of the truck was blocking our driveway. I don't want to, I don't want that to be a focus. The focus is a driver was hurt and we feel for him, but if this happens again, where do we go from there, right? Then it becomes a real big issue. And there's one thing I don't believe in guarantees. No one can guarantee, panel or residents or business, that this won't happen again. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next one is David Lynch. Dave, you can unmute yourself now.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Good evening, Mr. Lynch. Yep, we can
Yes,
hear you.
Mr. Delaney hit the nail on the head. He saw what was really going on there almost on a daily basis with these trucks coming with raw material, with these half pieces of the 100-foot beams. They make the deliveries, many back and forths just to get the truck in through the back overhead door. I want to say at least 2 or 3 times a week at times. So then once the raw materials are inside the building, they weld these 2 sections together, and then they have to maneuver them out the building through that overhead door. And in the process of doing this, they're transferring the load from an overhead hoist to fork trucks, and it's a juggling act just to get things out of the building. You know, it's rubbing up against the side of the overhead door and the brick, and then the other end of it's pretty much up at the butter's fence. And I've submitted many videos of this activity going on. And there was an incident when they were trailering a load of these beams out back, and the load's overhanging so much, and they're trying to make the corner around the building, that it came into contact with the fence, and I've submitted video of this, and it runs down the side of the fence, and it sounds like someone's ripping open a tin can. And it actually pierced the fence in an area behind the Matthews property. And I've sent pictures of that and video of that as well. There was also another incident when they dropped the load off a fork truck. You know, I reported both of these incidents to OSHA. Apparently they made a site visit. They didn't see where the beam came in contact with the fence and pierced it. You know, and they asked one of the fork truck drivers whether he had dropped the load onto the flatbed truck. And of course he says no. What else is he gonna say? So this activity, it's dangerous. This isn't Tinker Toy stuff that they're dealing with. The use is not allowed, and they should not be allowed to continue operations there. I've been saying many times in previous emails that this is a health and safety issue for the abutters and the entire community. And the accident on January 4th pretty much says it all. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lynch. And yes, we have seen the videos you've sent to us. I know I've reviewed them and other zoning board members have too. So thank you for that information.
Oh, one other thing. As far as the amended cease and desist, there were 2 occasions when I witnessed them receiving raw material at the back of the building. One was on January 11th, and the other one was on January 15th. And I sent videos of that as well. So.
Yep. We've received those, and I viewed that one actually this morning, the one on the 15th, where first you said it was February 15th, and then later corrected yourself in the video that it was January 15th.
I had a long day at work that day.
I totally understand, but I want you to know that the zoning board has been reviewing those.
Thank you.
All right, so next we have Kathy and Tom K. Here you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Kathy.
All right, it's Kathy Kevlich, and my husband Tom is with me. And, you know I spoke at the last meeting, and I do appreciate the attention that you're giving to this matter, but I just have a couple of things to add to that. As far as Mr. Corner stating about the limited manufacturing and how vague our bylaws are, you have to go back to the word unobtrusive. And it means not conspicuous, not attracting attention, not easily noticed. And, you know, obviously none of that is true, because there have been many occasions of disruptive noise. And, you know, we've talked about that before. They've been ongoing, especially for the abutters, the Lynches, the Walshes, and the Maffeys. And for now, these abutters on Hanson who spoke tonight, because they're right close to it, we're across the street, and we're oftentimes in the back of our home, and yet it's very disruptive. And it's not all day, every day, so you certainly could have gone on a site visit. They knew you were going to be there too. I'm sure you wouldn't see what goes on a daily basis, on and off. And I guess the other really big concern that I have, I know the accident is not related to the use of the building in as far as perhaps the zoning goes, and that we're not talking about the safety issues. However, this is our neighborhood. It's mostly residential. We walk on this neighborhood. We walk down School Street all the time. I walk with my two little granddaughters. That's what we do. And yeah, we weren't there when it happened, but we could have been. And this type of a neighborhood is not designed for that type of manufacturing and that type of transporting of product. And we shouldn't have to worry about our safety in our own neighborhood from manufacturing and transporting of that type of steel beams and steel construction. So I guess I'm feeling a little bit frustrated, and I hope it's not the case, in that Mr. Corner is saying, and Mr. Webster is saying it's a one-time occurrence, and, you know, really they close the door and the noise isn't an impact, when, you know, many people who live in the neighborhood and have lived here for a long time are sharing with you what it's like for us. And these are our homes. And yeah, everybody's home from the pandemic, working at home, trying to do things. But we should be able to be in our homes and live peacefully without the constant, continual disruptions. And it's not every day, I understand that. But it's frequently enough that it certainly is obtrusive. So I don't know, Tom, did you have something to add?
I understand that there were noise measurements made according to Mr. Corner. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When were they made?
Yesterday.
Using what equipment?
My client can speak to that, and I've submitted a letter to the board.
And the board hasn't reviewed that, and these were measurements taken by the property, the business owner, and if we're going to be serious about noise measurements, it's going to be done by a outside person who comes in and takes those measurements. You know, I believe that, you know, I believe when somebody submits something, but he is not he's not an industrial hygienist, somebody who's trained to look at the noise levels or the safety of the site. So
thank you very much. You saved me some words.
Okay, so you know, and I appreciate that somebody's trying to do something, but that's not. We haven't had a chance to review it, and it's not meeting at least my standard for what we need for noise levels.
Well, that's good.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for listening. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. Also, Mr. Webster did say at the last meeting that they were already using details from Walpole Police for all of their shipments. So I guess I'm not really confident. It was Mr. Webster who said it when he spoke, and I took notes. I guess you know, I don't know how we could be confident that they would have details going forward. It sounds like they have for the past shipment, but I'm concerned about that as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Amy, who's next?
We have two more hands raised. In order, Matthew Lynch is next.
Go ahead, Mr. Lynch.
Topics on this. I really have a couple questions. The first one is probably for you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe Chief Carmichael could answer this too, is that I'm not really familiar with any other light business or light manufacturing business in Walpole. So could you give an example of one or two other light businesses? And also, Chief Carmichael, is it typical to have a police detail at other light manufacturing businesses in town?
So I'm happy to give you an example of one not too far from me. It's the Rolls-Royce propeller manufacturing facility on Norfolk Street. That's in the L&M zone, and that's business has been there for a long time. It used to be Bird Johnson, and I'll let the chief comment on, do they use police details for deliveries at that site?
So the question was, do we use them at additional sites?
Typically for light manufacturing businesses, or is this one of the only ones?
No, this is the only one.
Okay.
You know, like I said, there's times when we have oversized loads which require the pilot vehicles, but we don't typically do details for oversized loads.
Okay. Thank you. I guess we touched on the site visit a lot, and I was concerned, and board member Delaney had made a great point. I was just wondering, was that an unannounced visit, or did you tell them that you were coming today, or was that on the schedule?
No, it was on the schedule. It was posted at town hall. It was done with all the requirements to make sure that the zoning board wasn't violating any rules, and also we didn't just show up. We scheduled it with the business owner.
Sure, fair enough. I just think it's tough to just get one day out of it, and I think the noise reading for yesterday would be different than, as board member Delaney said, last week, the week before, a month before, and a month before that. So it's tough to just get one sample on that. So I appreciate that. I do have a big concern about the accountability of Mr. Webster and KW Steel. Just listening to some of his comments regarding the accident, of course, and God bless the guy the driver on that. But my question then is maybe Mr. Corner could answer this, is who loaded the beams onto that truck? Was it somebody for KW Steel? Is it your responsibility to load the beams onto the truck?
You know what? I really think that we're getting off the issue tonight as far as who's loading something on. That's not what the zoning board is here for. The zoning board is here to determine the use of the property.
But I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. But he mentions that it was a mistake by the contractor. But I think the residents would disagree, because could he not see that 31 foot of beams that are hanging off by 31 feet should be an issue with the safety of the residents and the drivers? I think that's a huge issue, and he has to take accountability for that. And what's to say that's not going to happen next time? For an example, 1 week, probably 1 week, maybe a little bit after that day, I had the I was walking my dog around the block, and I came across a down stop sign and street sign at the corner of School Street and Norton Street. And right underneath it was a Peterbilt mud flap. So obviously, that's, would think that would be some type of evidence, but a week or so after that accident, we still see a truck who is taking down stop signs where my kids would be going to the bus stop the next day or that day. And it's unfortunate because it is a huge safety issue. And this is a business owner who said he would continue to work with the neighborhood, but I just haven't seen it and nobody has seen it. So those are some of the issues that we keep arising. That's all. I appreciate the feedback and allowing me to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, Amy, who's next?
Okay, the next one is Ken Moppy. There you go. Ken, you should be good.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, Ken.
Oh, thank you. I just want to piggyback. I'm here with my wife, Ann, and I'm in a butter. I live at 10 Hartshorn Road, right behind KW. So I want to piggyback on some of the things that have been said. Jane hit the nail on the head when she said that she's concerned about the residential neighborhood. And Matt just mentioned the first thing I was going to mention about the stop sign. Now, I went to get coffee last week also, and I saw the stop sign laying on the ground. When I got back to my house, Dave, my neighbor, had told me that a trailer truck had knocked it over. There was a Peterbilt sign laying on the ground right beside the stop sign. What happens is these trailer trucks come down out of KW down Norton Street, and they cannot make that turn onto School Street. So they have to back up, and evidently the truck hit the sign. This is also a stop sign for children, and there's a daycare in that house right there on the corner. A couple of things I have issue with the lawyer was said. He said the door in the back would be down. He's correct, it probably would be down in January during this weather. But come April, May, June, and July, that door will be up. There's no way that door will be down. He said he has no control over the trailers. Well, if he wasn't producing what he's producing, he would not have called a trailer of that size. So he does have some responsibility there. And the other thing he said was they're not very common. These large loads are not very common. Well, I see at least one a week leaving the shop. Dave and Bob, they mentioned they went down and heard some noise inside and outside. There was one more source of noise, and that's the beams dragging along the concrete floor. If you drag a beam across the concrete floor in an empty, hollow building with the door open, that echo reverberates right through the neighborhood. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Okay, the next we have is Bill O'Connell. Here you go, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
So I'm not going to take any more of the board's time, but just in conclusion, I again want to raise the issue of how this decision is being framed for you, and again, our position is that what's at stake is the October 13th cease and desist order, which has two components, which not only includes the use regulations, which I think there's been more than enough evidence to hopefully convince this board that the use is not allowed, heavy manufacturing use is not allowed. But also the other component of the October 13th, 2020 cease and desist notice was also the certificate of occupancy. So understood the board's being asked about the use, but that's not the only issue. As the primary issue I would submit is whether there's enough evidence to uphold the building inspector's cease and desist letter, a cease and desist order. And part of that is the occupancy. You've heard plenty of evidence and testimony about how the use has changed that would have required an occupancy permit. Not to beat a dead horse, but again, I would also ask the board to look at that general section 5A use concerning injurious uses and the danger that is presenting to the neighborhood. You know, there was an amended cease and desist order, and now we're hearing that amended the cease and desist order was potentially amended again verbally through the use of a police detail. So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I want to reiterate that the burden should not be on the residents. There was discussion from applicants' counsel about litigation and not wanting to engage in litigation. The burden should not be on the residents. So for those, I would ask the board to just simply uphold the cease and desist order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Connell.
All right, I see that Mr. Carmichael's hand is raised. If you want to interject.
Sure, thank you. I was just felt it was important to note something from the crash reconstruction report. I'll just read a paragraph from there. It kind of relates to the dynamics of loading the truck and somewhat the chain of events that led to the crash. This is Officer Detective Foley. He spoke to the operator of the truck, Mr. Boatland. Mr. Boatland went on to relate the following. Mr. Boatland drives around the back of 50 School Street in order to load his trailer. He was scheduled to pick up 4 I-beams from KW Structures. The I-beams are 100 feet in length. The beams are loaded on the trailer and secured at the front end of the trailer with chains. Because of the gate, Mr. Boatland has to drive through to get to the street. He does not secure the beams on the rear end of the trailer, nor does he extend his trailer. Mr. Boatland said that when he approaches the gate, he has to swing wide to the left and drive through the grass. This was evident by photographs that were taken at the scene where there were tire tracks in the grassed area. Mr. Boatland does this maneuver. There's photographs of that. Mr. Boatland stated that he then has to drive up Hanson Ave, straighten out the truck, and then back into the paved area at 50 School Street. Once he's parked off the road, a forklift truck from the company will lift the steel beams while Mr. Boatland extends his trailer. At this point, the forklift would put the beams back down on the trailer, and Mr. Boatland would then secure the entire load. This all went into the crash reconstruction report, as I mentioned, just to kind of demonstrate the dynamics of what it takes to load the truck and the maneuvers that it has to make in order to come on and off the property. And then obviously we're needing to go into a public way. So that's all.
Okay, Chief Carmichael, thank you.
All right, I don't see anyone else that has their hand raised, so I'll wait a second if anyone comes up.
Okay, there was one chat comment by, I believe, it is John to all, back just a little while ago. And the question is, what line item of the use table is this allowed under? Well, that's actually the problem that we're running into is nowhere in the zoning bylaw does it say steel fabrication of 100-foot steel beams of, I-beam and other types with grinding and welding. That's not in the bylaw. It doesn't say it's allowed. It doesn't say it's not allowed. And when we start looking at, the industrial, the difference between the limited manufacturing and industrial, turns out that most things that are, there's only a few things that are not allowed in the limited manufacturing that would be allowed in the industrial area. And those are petroleum storage, coal elevator, adult entertainment, and I think a marijuana dispensary. So that's the other issue that the zoning board is dealing with is it's not real, it's not clear. It's not in favor of the property, the business owner, and it's not in favor of the neighbors. We have to sit in judgment on this as far as what is the best way to handle this and figure out where it does it fit in this district? Does it not? One of the options, and I'm going to put this out there to the other board members, is that we consider it as possibly under section G of the table of allowed uses, which talks about, I'm just scrolling down to it so I read exactly what it is. Section G. Section G says, establishment for the repair or storage of boats, trailers, trucks, farm implements, or machinery. If we considered it with this, it would require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals, at which point the zoning board could put the conditions that we've been talking about on it and make it actually legal, saying that, there's certain hours of operations that they have to do. There's limits to what we could allow them to do. So that's one of my thoughts as far as how we can make it so that the neighbors get protection and the business owner is still allowed to operate a business, because I think that if you look and say, well, where in Walpole could they operate? It's the industrial zone is the same as many of these things, except for this one area where we could get a special permit. Town council, do you want to comment on that, or as far as the use?
Yeah, one of the big problems I see with that, not that any of this can't be worked out, is you're really limited to the cease and desist order about the issues that are before you on the administrative appeal. And, the cease and desist order did not say your use requires a special permit under this section. It says that it doesn't qualify as limited manufacturing, which is a use as of right. So, I to look into that issue a little bit more, though, would be maybe to talk to the appellant's counsel, continue tonight's public hearing, confer with counsel and the building commissioner between hearing sessions and see, if they might be amenable to that. Then you could revise the cease and desist order, require a special permit, then have that hearing on the special permit application. Those are some options. Another option that Bob had mentioned earlier was talking about a certificate. One of the attorneys for the residents had astutely pointed out there are two issues in the cease and desist. One is if it's a limited manufacturing use as of right, and the other issue is the certificate of occupancy. Now, that presents an opportunity also that can conditions be put on the certificate of occupancy such that you'd satisfy those same concerns. That might be something worthwhile discussing as well. If you're looking to be able to impose conditions that would try to address the adverse effects reported by the neighbors, and be short of, upholding a cease and desist order that, you're ordering them to shut down, basically.
Right. Mr. Yanovich, what's your thoughts on an occupancy permit with conditions? Is that something that you've seen done before, or it's not something I'm familiar with?
Yeah, so the occupancy is fine with conditions as long as we could find an occupancy in which they fall under. So if the board finds that, which is the crux of the issue here, is the use as presented allowed in the district? I think, you know, George, the town council set it out. If the use we find is allowed in the district, then you condition that use based on a special permit. But we can't make up a special permit for a particular use. There needs to be an assigned use that we can find in the bylaw that this falls under. So that really is the issue: is this a use that's allowed? If it's allowed, is it allowed by right, or is it allowed by a special permit? And if it's allowed by a special permit is a local jurisdiction. So the premise of issuing a special permit is not like a variance where it's statutory. The special permit is a local requirement where the local jurisdiction can issue conditions to protect the public from that use. So, I mean, you know, I don't envy the board in this situation where they have to determine, is the use allowed? So if in fact the board finds the use is allowed, then, you know, so be it, the use is there. If the board finds that the use is allowed by special permit, then as town council's, you know, spelled out, we can come back, have a special permit hearing, and the board can condition the special permit based on whatever conditions they feel are applicable to this particular use. Is it common? It's, you know, special permits are common everywhere. You grant special permits, you know, on a weekly basis. The difficulty here is determining whether or not it's one eligible for a special permit, or is it as of right. So that's, you know, that's the task here at hand, and that's where we are.
I should add, to follow up on that, John, you know, if the board found that it was as of right, and that finding would take place either through an affirmative vote upholding the appeal, or an affirmative vote, you know, overturning the cease and desist. In other words, you have a use as of right. If you're going to qualify the use under another portion of the bylaw, then that's a different story. Then it's not a use as of right. It's a use allowed by special permit that would then be subject to special permit conditions. And one option that came up about the certificate of occupancy issue is, you know, if the board found that it was in fact a use as of right, in other words, that it qualified as limited manufacturing, that a special permit is not required and it is permitted as of right, can you use the certificate of occupancy to impose adequate conditions that would be enforceable? You know, that would be the sort of, not a compromise position, but a way of, you know, meeting in the middle somewhere, of short of shutting the business down and attempting to address the adverse effects reported by the neighbors through those conditions. Then those would be enforceable conditions. You know, that would be the question for you, Mike, is if they were to find it was limited manufacturing, can you issue a certificate of occupancy with conditions that are enforceable?
Yeah, we can absolutely issue a certificate of occupancy if the applicant chose to file for that. I don't think that would be an issue. And as Attorney Corner, if he was true to his word, he spoke tonight on a number of issues that he would be, or the applicant would be, you know, amenable to conceding to, you know, having these conditions put in place. So if that is the case, and the board found that this was an as of right use, we would request that the applicant or the appellant request a certificate of occupancy, and we would place conditions on that certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, I think that would be a way of dealing with it, John. You know, that could be a dialogue that takes place outside the public hearing, and then, you know, a document with conditions could be presented to you. The zoning board can then you know, depending on what is agreed to about the cease and desist, the board could either, you know, go ahead and act on the appeal. The appeal could be withdrawn in lieu of the certificate of occupancy. In other words, they're agreeing in part to a portion of the cease and desist, so it renders it moot. You know, that it's a way, it can be presented back before you in this public forum, but, you know, the details of those conditions could be, you know, worked out between the building commissioner and the business operator, you know, between sessions, and then you would have something that you'd be able to look at. You know, it's just a suggestion. You don't have to go that way either. You could close the hearing tonight and vote on the appeal as well. I'm just trying to put out there options, you know, if you were inclined toward trying to condition this in some way. I don't see a great fit of just sort of fitting the use into another category that would require a special permit, because that really wasn't the basis of the cease and desist. And you're really you're limited to those issues that are on appeal before you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I guess one of my concerns is if it can't go in the LM zone, where can it go in town? And as I look at the bylaw, it doesn't seem like there's any place where it, you know, there's nothing that says, you know, steel beam welding and fabrication. We don't have that in our bylaw. So can the applicant's attorney turn around and say, well, you know, it's not clear, so therefore it would be an allowed, you know, you don't say it's not allowed, so it should be allowed. Because I know what the building inspector said was that it was heavy manufacturing of steel not allowed in the LM district. So, you know, I'm looking to see where does this go? We deny.
I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, part of the problem with this whole thing is, you know, everybody's sort of right, and you're, you know, the business owner has their point to make, their counsel does, the neighbors certainly do, their counsel makes a good case, and stuck in between is a pretty ambiguous bylaw that you're trying to apply, so that makes it difficult. That there isn't a clear answer. Both sides can make the case that it qualifies as limited manufacturing. You know, the question is, how do you get to a good solution with that difficulty? And, you know, potentially a solution would be conditioning it, as opposed to trying to fit it in that box. I mean, that conversation could also take place if you look at the bylaw a little bit. If the building commissioner looks at the bylaw a little bit more and says, you know what, this really could fall within the special permit category, and then you could condition it the same way by way of special permit. But you know, again, it would benefit from further dialogue, you know, in an effort to try to see what those substantive conditions would be, and then you can fit it procedurally to where you need it to be.
Okay, so I've heard from town council, I think now on 3 occasions, that it would benefit us to continue the dialogue, and what that means is continue the case so that we can still keep it open, but have more ability to come up with something that's going to satisfy the neighbors and the business owner. George, is that sort of what you're getting at?
Yes, correct. Yeah, try to get to the right substantive result, and then we'll figure it out procedurally. One thing I'd recommend too is I didn't do the math on the deadline. It would be good to get an oral assent tonight from the appellant's counsel that we can continue the public hearing in the event that the deadline is coming up, and then we can do a written agreement and file that with the town clerk at some point. I want to make sure that you're still within the required deadline. I think you are, but you know, with the holidays and COVID and all the rest, I haven't done the math on it. So that would be good to make sure we're in agreement on that as well.
Okay, this is just procedural. Mr. Corner, would you be willing to extend out?
Yes, and if I may, I just like to say I agree with everything that the chair and the building commissioner and town council just said about how to resolve this case, and that's really where I started this evening. That my client's willing to live with conditions, and I think there's been some question during the course of the evening about, well, how do we know that the business owner is going to comply with these conditions? Well, the answer to that is, if there's a certificate of occupancy that's subject to certain conditions and my client violates one of those conditions, then they're subject to an enforcement action that the building inspector can then bring an enforcement action, and will know specifically, and my client and the neighbors will know specifically what my clients can and cannot do. So I think that's, I haven't researched the issue, but that's that was the direction I was going from the beginning. So, although I didn't say it specifically, but I think that's the appropriate approach. So, yes, we'd agree to an extension. If Mr. Webster would like the opportunity to speak briefly, if that would be okay at this point.
That would be fine.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Harry.
We can hear you. All right, thank you very much. I don't want to confuse the issue here, but when you refer to heavy manufacturing, I believe you're referring to weight. And I don't believe that's what the definition of heavy manufacturing is. And I want you to understand that everything that we do within that facility is done using the cranes that are in that existing facility. Within that facility that was retrofitted and presumably approved by the town of Walpole are 4 7.5-ton cranes, 2 in each of the bays. So the heaviest piece that can be picked out of there is 15 ton or 30,000 pounds. We have not done that. It's unfortunate that the job that we've been doing, and by the way, for everybody, I'm sure we'll be very happy. The job that we had with the 100-foot beams is done, and I will commit we will not have any more 100-foot beams coming out of Walpole. So that should hopefully make the situation a little bit better. But also, just so we talk about big trucks, a legal truckload trailer is 48 feet long. Steel suppliers, when they come in, for the most part, they will have a 48-foot trailer. That's not an overlength load. It's not an overweight load or overwidth load. That is a legal load. It does not require any permitting. It would not require any police detail. We had agreed to a police detail for any load that would require a permit, and we're committed to that going forward. I would like to talk briefly about the safety issue, the accident. Certainly, our number one concern is with the health of the driver. The night of the accident, we had got a report that he was actually home, and I was extremely happy until I heard the next day that was not the case. But the accident should never have happened. No, it wasn't one of our trucks. It was one that our customer provided. But we've done multiple loads of 100-footers out of our shop, and the driver had never crossed the street. There was no need for him to cross the street. And not only that, the driver had 2 escorts, and the 2 escorts weren't paying attention. So there was no reason for that accident to happen. But going forward, we hired the police details we agreed to, and obviously, we didn't have any issues. So, again, I hate to see that an accident happen. I don't want to see anybody get hurt, and it certainly was avoidable. Should not have happened. Now let's talk just briefly about some things that we can do and things that we can't do. The back of our facility, and I'm really abutting Mr. Lynch's property. That is the facility's storage area. Now, whether we're making steel beams or we're making cotton balls, any tractor trailer that's making a delivery or shipping out of there is going to be going back there. It's the same size truck. It's going to be a 48-foot box or flatbed, and they're going to have air brakes, and they're going to make noise. There is nothing that I can do about stopping a noise for a tractor trailer, nor the noise of a backup horn. You know, we can make every effort to keep the door closed as much as possible, but there will be times when we're bringing material into the shop that the door needs to be open. We have committed to not using the impact hammer when the door is open, and the intent behind the noise readings was my attempt to try and quantify what is and isn't objectionable. I did a little Google search about backup horns, and in as much as we have a storage area, the only way for anybody, again, regardless what the facility is, the only way for anybody to move material around in their storage area is with a fork truck. And every fork truck has a backup horn. So it doesn't take much Googling to find out that a backup horn has a decibel reading of between 97 and 112 decibels. Now again, backup horn is only backing up, obviously not going forwards. We have two fork trucks, they both have backup horns. But the point that I was trying to make is when the door is closed, the decibel readings coming from inside the shop are far below what is acceptable of having a fork truck with a backup horn in the storage yard. And that was the only point I was trying to make. I was trying to quantify it to say what should be acceptable and what is not acceptable. For it to be a storage area, you have to use fork trucks. They have to have backup horns. So between 95 and 112 has to be acceptable. I believe that is everything that I wanted to address.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Webster.
You're welcome. Oh, one more comment, please.
Sure, go ahead.
Today we had the visit from 3 of the board members. I would extend that an invitation to any of the board members whenever they want to come over. It does not need to be, we don't need to be notified ahead of time. You know, the door's there. Come on in. Obviously, we want you to wear safety equipment, but come on in. We'll show you around anytime. I think when this first took place, Mr. Yanovich had said that when he received noise complaints, many times he had come over and he didn't hear anything, he'd go away. And of course, the one time we had the impact hammer out back, he had said, obviously, that was noisy. And he was correct, that was noisy. But we build a lot of different things. It's not like we're building widgets that you're doing the same operation 8 hours a day. So we're building a lot of different things. So yes, some operations are noisier than other operations. So feel free, any of the board members, when you want to come over, by all means, come on over.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other board members? Bob, you were there today. What's your thoughts? How do you want to proceed on this?
Well, I think it does make sense to review what came in late today, and for the board to maybe have some time to consider the alternatives. One thing, just in hearing the discussion from the members of the public, which were very helpful, and listening to Drew's comments earlier, I was just flipping through the bylaw and we're talking about light manufacturing versus heavy manufacturing, what the difference between those might be. But in the use table, it says a plant for light metal or plastic fabrication. And I'm just offering something for the board to consider is whether, like, the word manufacturing doesn't appear in that portion of the use table in Q, sub-item Q there. And to the point that was made, whether we're considering heavy manufacturing to be based on the weight of the things that are being constructed. I don't know that that's necessarily the question before us. It says light metal or plastic fabrication, which, you know, to my mind could be read to mean that, you know, plastic is a light material and they're talking about fabrication of light metals, not 8,000 pound beams. The complicating factor, of course, is that there are, you know, there's equipment inside the building to allow them to move much heavier pieces of metal around, and so that may have been true historically, but I guess that's something I'd like to give greater thought to myself, in terms of what just the straight application of the use table, and whether that leads us to one conclusion or another. Because I think it is a two-step process. The first is, do we think this is an allowed use under the use table? And if we don't, then that sort of ends the matter. If we do, then I think the suggestion to proceed with an approach that might involve a certificate of occupancy with conditions is probably the best way to go, as it does seem that there's willingness on all sides to discuss the appropriate range of conditions that you know, that might satisfy the board in that situation. So I think it's kind of that two-step process, but I would like the time to think that through a little bit more, and the board members to consider it as well, and then perhaps at the next hearing we'd be in a position to discuss that and proceed at that point.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And one of the concerns I have is, if we said that we thought this was an allowed use, I think the applicant could then just get a building permit, I'm sorry, a certificate of occupancy, and not have any conditions. So I think it's important that if we were to go that route, we talk about conditions, you know, while we look at this. So I'm agreeing with you, Bob, on that. So, okay, any other board members want to comment on this before we, I think we're going to continue it. Okay. Okay, Ashley, any comments on this from your perspective?
No.
That's fine. I know you've been handling a lot of other issues for the zoning board, so.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, Mike, you know, just before we continue here, if I could just I don't want to extend this any longer, but I just want to explain for the public and for the constituents that are out there. So we issued a cease and desist. The cease and desist stands. However, the way that the courts work, just for the public's understanding, is the applicant or the person who is in violation has the opportunity to exhaust their administrative remedies. So there have been a lot of phone calls and emails and questions as to why this cease and desist hasn't been upheld. You know, because there are, you know, common rights that people have to exhaust their administrative remedies. So just so the public who's out there and the you know, people who have participated tonight, we are on this. We brought this here to the Board of Appeals so that it could be in a public forum. But again, you know, the applicant does have their rights to exhaust their administrative remedies, and that's where we are at this point. So I just wanted to bring that out, you know, in this forum so people understand where we are and where we're going. You know, we've brought this to the proper channel, and you know, the board is doing their you know, due diligence, and that's where we are. So I just wanted to make that final comment before you make a decision to continue or whatever the decision may be.
Okay, and that explains why the business is still operating, because they're appealing, they're in the administrative appeal process. Correct, Mike?
Correct. So if we were to go to the court to seek injunctive relief on this, you know, this cease and desist, the courts would probably say to the town, well, have you exhausted your administrative remedies? And that's the local arbiter, as the Board of Appeals, to decide whether or not the use is allowed. So that's why the use is still operating at this time.
Okay, thank you for that explanation for the, for us and particularly the public. I think they need to understand where we are in this process. Okay, Amy, what are we looking at for, availability about a month out from now?
All right. So today is the 20th. So, all right, the 17th is school vacation. So February 24th, we just have Doopy Street on for that night.
Okay, and Mr. Corner, is that okay for you to, will you grant we don't know what the timetable is. We haven't looked at that, but do you agree to an extension to 1 week beyond that date?
We will grant whatever extension the town requires to meet whatever statutory deadlines are required.
All right. Just for the record, the appeal was filed with the clerk on December 8th. So just so we have a timetable.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Okay, so Amy, you said February 24th, was it? What is it?
February 24th, yes.
Okay, so this case will be continued until February 24th, 7 p.m. By Zoom meeting. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, just in terms of communicating with the town, should I communicate with Mr. Pucci or Mr. Yanovich?
You can communicate with both them, and if you have some procedural questions, you can go to Amy on those.
Okay, and again, I would welcome any other input from the chief or anybody, any place else that can provide us with some helpful information as to what the town is looking for, so that we can operate consistent with the town's needs.
Okay, and I'll work with board members. Will work with town council and the zoning enforcement officer on this. Okay.
Chair Lee, I'm sorry. I just want to say that there are 2 hands of repeat people in the attendees with their hand raised. I don't know if you want to hear from them.
Yes, it's important that everybody gets a chance to talk, and just ask them to get to the point. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Like Mark to go ahead or me to go ahead? I think Mark was saying something.
I was, thank you. I mean, I was simply want to, if the town needs a letter from me, or if I should do an agreement with Mr. Pucci, or whatever makes you folks comfortable in terms of substantiating the extension.
Yeah, Amy, can you touch base with the attorney to get the extension as we discussed?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
Okay.
We may not need it.
I don't think
if we do. If we do, yeah, we'll get it in writing and filed.
Whatever you need.
Okay.
All right. There's only 1 hand raised actually in the chat for right now, so I'm just gonna put Bill O'Connell up. All right, Bill, whenever you're ready.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Connell.
Mr. Chairman, just for just a procedural point and for point of clarification, on behalf of Mr. Lynch, Mr. and Mrs. Lynch, I am going to object. I'm going to request that you close the hearing. Some of the discussion that I've recently heard, I would submit, veers away from what your board's jurisdiction and what you're entrusted to do. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I've heard discussions from you to try to craft a solution to act as a mediator, and certainly, under Chapter 40A, your board is entrusted with enforcing the zoning bylaws. I'm hearing discussions concerning a use variance. A town council is I don't know if this is a deliberation. Mr. Chairman, you referenced a section of the bylaw for potentially a special permit that doesn't apply, that doesn't include manufacturing. One of the board members mentioned that there's a willingness on all sides to continue the matter. On behalf of my client, the issue is very clear. The applicant violated the cease and desist order. There's plenty of evidence. They haven't met their burden. You're shifting the burden back to the residents. So there's not a willingness on all sides to continue the matter. Your board is not entrusted with trying to craft a solution. Understood, business is important, but the bylaws are crafted to protect, one of the reasons the bylaws are crafted is to protect the residents. And I would submit that by continuing this hearing and entering into a discussion with the applicant or with town council, and again, town council, I don't know what your role is. I don't know if you're here to, if you're here as part of the deliberation, but you're almost becoming a member of the board. And I would submit, again, this violation notice is pretty simple. It has two components. The occupancy, which it's clear, the applicant changed the use. They didn't get an occupancy permit. And then the use regulations are clear. The plain meaning, we've heard discussion about things being ambiguous, not being sections in the bylaw. Look at the case law. The case law just references that words are interpreted according to their common and approved uses and language. That LM definition is very, very clear about the use not being obtrusive and being low density. So, I can appreciate, I guess, the board's position that they want to try to craft a solution. That's not your job, with all due respect. So for those reasons, I'm asking that you close the hearing on behalf of my client, Dave and Stephanie Lynch. Thank you.
Well, board members, unless you want to add something, I don't think it's going to serve anybody. It's not going to serve the neighbors, the town, or the business if we close this without looking at all the evidence. So,
and procedurally, Mr. Yanovich, you keep mentioning exhausting administrative remedies, and I would ask that you confer with town council. Of course, the court will look at whether you've exhausted administrative remedies, but you have every authority under Chapter 48, Section 7 to go in and seek an enjoyment or seek an injunction if there's been a violation of the cease and desist. So, the board, you could certainly act, you could have acted, and the board can certainly act.
Mr. O'Connell, I'll ask you, what do we act on and what authority do we go to enforce that cease and desist?
Your cease and desist order and violations, an amended cease and desist order with violations. And certainly you have every right under Section 48, Section 8. You also have, Section 40, Section 21D to enforce monetary fines of $300 a day, which you've never done. And I think at the last hearing, you had the economic development individual, Ashley, referenced that the applicant should not be fined. So you've got plenty of authority there. So I know you're trying to appease the neighbors, but with all due respect, I would submit you're shifting the burden to the neighbors, and now there's talk about a solution, which is totally unfair to my client and for the rest of the neighbors.
Right. Attorney O'Connell, for your clients who you're representing, I would simply ask you, when there is not, let's say there wasn't compliance, where does the building department go? 48, Section 8. Do we send police officers?
You can file. Ask town council. You can file something in Superior Court, District Court. Okay. There's a non-criminal disposition. Please confer with town council.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's what
directed to do anything for the record.
I know. So,
John, I recommend you just take a vote on the continuance.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough back and forth on that.
Yep. No. So, continued until February 24th. Roll call vote for the. Could I have a motion to continue? Moved by Jane.
Second.
Second by Bob. Any further discussion on continuing until the 24th? Okay, roll call vote. Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Dane Coffey.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
Dave Anderson.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay, so that's continued. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you. We had quite a few people here with us tonight, so thank you for being here for that. Next case we have is case number 20-40, Wall Street Development Corporation, administrative appeal of the zoning enforcement officer's violation of notice and cease and desist regarding property at 48 Burns Ave for violation of the comprehensive permit number 5-19 that is currently under appeal, specifically condition A7 requiring compliance with all local regulations unless waived. Condition A13 requiring compliance with various conditions prior to any site clearing, tree removal, or grading. Okay. Amy, can you let the applicant in on this?
So he is not present at the moment.
Okay.
I believe he did email Ashley and I wanting to continue.
Okay. Do we have that? I guess I want to make sure that we have that. But I also recognize that we have the building inspector with us, or we just did.
I mean,
yeah, we still do.
so he sent an email saying that he said, "Can we continue tonight's hearing? I'm not feeling well and it's getting late. Let me know. Thanks." And I just replied that he could ask you as the chair. I don't make the decision.
No. Okay, well, I think it's only fair that the applicant be here, but I also recognize that we have Mr. Yanovich here and Mr. Crowley. But I think the applicant has to be here for it's his hearing. He's the one that appealed the decision, and that's why we're here. So I think out of fairness, he does have to be here. So and does anybody have any other thoughts or?
Just one thought on that. I mean, the cease and desist order remains in effect, I assume, so that, the applicant or in this case, the appellant, can't just keep continuing and escape enforcement of the cease and desist. I just want to make sure that that's the case.
George, is that the way you see it? That
yeah, and I believe that, and Mike can correct me, I believe that there has been compliance with the cease and desist. In other words, there hasn't been any further activity pending this appeal. Is that
Correct.
Right, Mike?
To the best of my knowledge, unlike the previous case, this applicant or appellant has actually ceased pending the outcome of the board's decision.
Yeah. So, John, yeah.
Also asked Landis to be here tonight, so both her and I have waited till this point this evening.
So I'd recommend that you open the hearing, but then move to continue at the applicant's request and to a date certain.
okay, and I, Landis, I understand you're out there and you've been waiting, and Ashley, we have your letter from earlier today, Ashley. That's in the record for us. And town council has just advised that we open it and then continue it to a date certain.
Amy,
at the applicant's request.
At the applicant's request.
What day was this filed?
On Viewpoint. Hold on one moment. It was accepted by the clerk on December 16th and filed on the 14th, so.
And how long do we have to hear this?
So with administrative appeals, a decision needs to be rendered within 100 days of the application, which gives us till March 26th to have a decision.
Yeah, and you're opening the hearing timely because you are opening it tonight. You have 65 days to open the hearing.
Right, but only 100 days for the decision.
Yeah.
The variance.
I'm just saying on the hearing, you're good, and then you'd continue, just as long as you render the decision, as Ashley's saying, in 100 days.
Okay, I actually feel comfortable that we'll be able to render a decision once we have the hearing. I don't think it's anywhere near as complicated as the last case. So that being said, and at the advice of town council, we have opened the hearing. Does anybody have anything that they want to say about this? But I do think we should continue it until the applicant is here.
Agreed.
Okay.
Let's pick a day.
Okay. What do we have? What's the upcoming meeting that looks a little late, Amy?
That looks light. I would say February 24th is Doopy and School Street. Next week is Moose Hill and Burns Ave. That's closed for deliberation only. And February 3rd is clear with nothing.
That's the one Bob can't come though.
Right, correct.
March 3rd. Oh, sorry, February 3rd, sorry.
Yeah.
Next week.
We've been meeting enough. We've been at this quite a bit. So let's put it to the 24th of February 24th.
Okay.
Okay. So could I have a motion to continue until February 24th?
So moved.
Okay. And at the request, this is at the
request of the applicant.
Request of the applicant.
Can I just note that Landis will not be able to attend on the 24th, just for the record.
Okay. And Landis, if you can hear us, I'm sorry that you stuck around for this whole thing tonight. And okay. So it's been motioned and seconded. Roll call vote to continue until February 24th for case number 20-40, the appeal. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if we don't have, if Landis is not available, I'm just wondering whether the board would benefit from her input on this at all, or should we pick a date that she can make?
Could we add to next Wednesday?
What do we have for next Wednesday? We've got Doopy and Moose Hill
that night. So that wouldn't work for Landis either.
Yeah. The reason she can't attend is because she has conservation meetings on those nights.
Okay.
John?
Yes.
John?
Yes, George.
Yeah, I should note, I'm sorry that Landis had to sit all night for this as well, but, you know, to me, there are very distinct issues. If there's conservation permitting in place, that doesn't mean that there isn't other jurisdictional issues, including zoning issues. So, in my opinion, Landis need not attend this. I mean, I don't want to tell people what to attend and what not, but, you know, the issues that I see that are at issue on the appeal of Mike's cease and desist really don't involve jurisdiction of other boards. It's really a zoning issue. And whether, you know, there was a zoning violation as to what was being done there. In other words, was this as of right under zoning or not? And whether there's other permitting in place really has no relevance.
Okay, and
she could just draw up a memo.
We already have, we had from Landis part of what we received was the whole permit, the permit that they had for the site. So, okay, but George, your point is well taken. We can continue this until the 24th as originally stated.
27th. Oh, I'm sorry, 24th. Sorry. Looking at the wrong Wednesday.
No. Okay. Okay, so roll call. Thank you for that extra discussion, but roll call vote for continuing at the request of the applicant until February 24th. Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
Dave Anderson.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay.
Murphy, aye.
That's,
So apparently Lou's on the agenda for the 27th.
what's that,
What?
Ash?
Oh, on the 24th, So
What about it?
27th is a good date. He's on the 24th agenda, so, for Concom, so that's not a good day to continue, but we're all set on the 27th.
No, I think we went on the
Wait a minute,
24th.
no. 24th, I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, did you continue the 24th? So he also has Conservation Commission that night as well, so we'll have to coordinate.
Wait, who does?
Lou,
Oh,
Uh-oh. Well,
Well, he'll have to figure that out. So I'll do the best to work so that we can, maybe we'll take him at the end again, but we'll see. So, okay. But we've already voted, we've already continued it. It's out until the 24th.
oh, but it wouldn't matter anyway because he's already on the 24th for
Doobie.
Doobie. So he was already there, I guess. All right.
Okay.
Sorry, thinking out loud.
Yes. Okay. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
second by Jane.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. And we don't need a roll call vote to adjourn. So all those in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried. Michael, thank you for being with us tonight. George, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
George.
thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good night.